Thank you for joining me today. This is Paper Play with Julie Kay, and today I will be doing a tutorial on sewing a 4-hole pamphlet stitch in my signature using a screw punch. Today I'm going to be doing a little tutorial on how to make a 4-hole pamphlet stitch in your signature using a screw punch. And so for December, I had made a December daily traveler's notebook. And while I was working on it, I had it stored in this little cover, and it was just stored using the rubber bands. But now I do want to go ahead, since I'm finished with it, and create a 4-hole pamphlet stitch, which is the type of stitch I always use for my signatures, for my journals. And so I do have one just to show you. Here's one that I created quite a while ago, my gratitude journal, and as you can see there's 4 holes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what I'm going to be showing you guys how to create today. And I'm doing it a little bit differently than some people because I prefer using a screw punch tool. There's also one out there that looks like this from Martha Stewart, and I believe there's another couple of brands out there that are out there. This is kind of, I think, the original screw punch. And this one comes from Japan, so a lot of times people do call them Japanese screw punches. And I know most people who create their signatures will use a tool like this, which is a paper awl. And then they just punch their holes using this. But I find that my grip strength and my hand strength is not that great, so I choose to use this tool. Just because it can create holes anywhere in my page, and it works a little bit better. My technique might take a little bit longer than making holes through all your pages using this tool, but I find in the long run it works for me and my hands aren't as tired. So with that being said, what you're going to need for supplies to create this project is, first of all, of course, you need your signature. You're going to need a screw punch, and then if you guys don't know a lot about screw punches, they do have different tips on them. So this tip comes in and out, and there's different sizes. For my signatures, for my journals, I like to either use the 1.5 millimeter size or the 1 millimeter size. And today I'm just going to be using the 1.5 millimeter size. You can get these up into bigger sizes. There's a 2, there's a 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4 millimeter sizes. And basically what it does is it gives you either a smaller hole or a larger hole. The larger hole sizes are used when you're doing your eyelets. So for making your signatures, again, you want a fairly small hole. And so again, I'm using the 1.5 or the 1.5 millimeter one. So the screw punch, you also will need a pencil or a pen. You're going to need some scrap paper to create a template. And then, let's see, you will need, of course, a needle. And you just want to make sure that you choose a needle that's going to fit through your hole. So I already punched my hole right here. This is like a 2 millimeter size. This is the 1.5 millimeter size. So my needle is going to fit through there. And then, let's see, the thread. Personally, when it comes to making junk journals, I like to use a wax thread. You can buy it in different colors. This is some that I have purchased at Michael's. So here's what it looks like. It's from Art Minds, and it's called wax thread. You can get it in a couple different colors. So I'm just going to be using this cream or neutral colored today. So thread, and then you will need some sort of self-healing mat. Right, I'll be using this Fisker one. And the purpose of the self-healing mat is just to protect your end of your screw punch, just to make sure that you don't dull it or damage it. And then the other optional thing then, I guess, is if you really do want to measure, I'm going to show you guys how I create my templates for sewing just with a piece of paper. But if you want to measure exactly, you can use a ruler. And I highly recommend this one from J&S Hobbies and Crafts. I really like this ruler just because it has like in 1/8 increments. It has the 1/16 increments listed on the ruler. So I just wanted to recommend that ruler if you are going to use a ruler, but I'm not going to be using a ruler other than to possibly draw some lines on my template so that you guys can see better on the camera. So then the first thing that we're going to do is you need to measure your signature. And my signature and cover are exactly the same length. They are, if you were to take your ruler, they are 8 1/4 this way. So with that being said, then I will cut a piece of scrap paper. And so here's just a piece of typewriting or typewriter paper, and it is 8 1/4 long. And so the first thing that I always do when I start off making my template for making my holes and my signature is I like to just fold it in half. And this is just causing me to make a line down the center. And so I am just going to draw right now that line down the center just so you guys can see it better on the camera real quick. So again, I just folded down the middle of my scrap paper. That's the right length for my signature. My next step is I'm going to take this piece of paper and I'm going to fold it in half going up now. So again, I'm just going to draw the line right here, just so you guys can see it better on the camera. You do not need to do this. So far that we have a fold going this way and we have a fold going this way. Okay, so now we are going to fold in half from both the top and the bottom up to this middle fold line. So I'm going to make a fold right there. I'm going to flip the paper, and then I'm also going to fold up to that middle fold line also. And all this is doing is creating, we're using this as our template so that we can put our holes so they're evenly spaced. Okay, so now we have 3 folds. We have a fold, or we have the middle fold, we have this fold, and this fold. Okay, our next step then is we are going to fold the end to the first fold line, both on the top and the bottom. So we're going to fold it that way, and then I'm just going to flip it and do this on the other side. Okay, so after folding that first one up from both the bottom and the top, the next step is we're going to fold again. And so we're going to take the bottom and we want it to go up to this second fold line up on the top. And so I'm going to fold like that. I'm going to flip it and do the exact same thing. So again, I'm going to take the bottom and I'm going to fold up to this second line up at the top, or the second fold. Okay, so now here's what the template looks like. Again, it's all evenly spaced. I didn't have to do any measuring, but of course you could do this exact same thing using your ruler, but I just wanted to show people how to do it without having to measure. If you're like me and you hate measuring, I find this technique to go a lot faster for creating my templates. And most of the time I don't draw the lines in. Again, I'm just drawing in the lines so that you guys can easily see what I'm doing on the camera. So now I'm going to create my actual template for making my signature holes. And again, I want to create 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. where I'll be sewing. So again, this is my template. So I want to create a hole right here. I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to create a hole right here, my template. Skip this one. Hole here and here. And so now these are all going to be evenly spaced. They're going to be, this one's probably the size of this signature. They're all going to be about 2 inches apart. Okay, after drawing in the dots where I want my holes, I'm going to use my screw punch. And this just, to work one of these, if you have never used one of these before, is you just put the tip where you want to create the hole. And so I'm just centering it on this middle fold line and this bottom fold line right here. And you're just going to apply just a slight amount of pressure and push down. And there'll be a hole right there. See if I can find my needle right here so you guys can see that there's a hole right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the other holes that I want to create on my page. And so now I have 4 holes in my template. And so here's a template that I created that's very similar to this one. It just doesn't have the lines in it, but this is what it'll look like. If you guys are not creating the lines, you're just going to see all the folds and then the 4 holes. And then what I also like to do on my templates, because I use them over and over again out from scratch paper, so like here's some that I've made, is I like to also write down the top of my template and the bottom of my template. So I will write down the top and the bottom. I also like to write down the size, which of course you can just take a ruler, but this is for 1/8 and 1/4 length. Just because if I ever, like this one has 6 3/4, if I ever do a signature that's the exact same size, then I know I already have the template created. So I'll go back to using this one, I think, for the camera because it's easier to see. So I'll put top, bottom. This one's 8 1/4. Okay, so now the next step is to create our holes in each page for a signature. And you can either start in the middle and work your way to the cover, or start with the cover and work your way to the other pages. And now I don't have to worry because my cover and my inside pages are all the exact same size. So I just line it up again. This is the bottom and the top, and so I'm just going to line it up in the fold line. If you trust yourself, you can go ahead, take your screw punch and punch where you have your little template. If you're not so sure, you can take a little pencil and create a mark on the fold line. And the other thing that I like to do, because I like to be able to see where my fold line is better, is I actually fold this template back in half. And I'm going to switch back to this one just because the ink kind of bled through right here, and so that's going to make it a little more difficult for me to see. But I will line this up with my fold line, and I'm just going to, you can tell where I have a hole punched, and I'm just going to make a mark right on my fold line. And that's where I want to create my holes. So here, I'll show you guys here. And pencils marks can be erased, so if I hold it up really close, you guys can see I have a mark right there, one right there, right there, and right there. So I'm going to go ahead and take my handy dandy screw punch, and I'm just going to make a hole in each of those spots. Again, I really like this tool because you don't have to put a lot of pressure or worry about hand strength. And so now I've created holes in my signature cover. So I'll go ahead and grab the next page. So I set this aside and I put it with the page up. So here's my next page. I'm going to open it up and do the exact same thing. Again, I like to do mine like I told you guys, where I fold the paper in half so I can see my fold line better. I'm going to create marks where those holes are. Now again, some people will use this tool, the awl, A-W-L, and make their holes, but this works the best for me. So again, now I have those 4 holes. And so I'm going to so again, if you look closely, you can see that I have holes on the fold line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of the rest of this, but I wanted to show you guys one little trick. Is if most of my journal that I'm working, or signature I'm working on today, I'll have that same size paper, but here's one little insert that I have in here. And so what I'm going to do with this one is, since it's smaller, I have to decide on my template where I want those holes to be in here. So usually I will just kind of eyeball it, but you can of course measure it if you want to be an exact type of person. You can do that. And so usually what I do is this one's corner rounded, so that makes it a little more confusing, but I will line it up. If I have a whole bunch of papers in the same, I will just make marks where I want to line it up. And then even right here, I'll just write the word file folder. So if I have like 3 or 4 file folders that I'm adding into my signature, they'll all be the same. I'll have the holes in the same spots. But I forgot that I should have put it on the other side here, so I'm going to line up that file folder with the bottom of where I wanted it, and then you just want to make sure that you're going to have at least 2 holes in everything that you're sewing in so that it stays into your signature. You could also do this if you're adding envelopes, if you're adding paper bags and you're folding them in half. I do that tags. So there's my 2 holes for this piece. You can, like I said, do that same technique if you have smaller pieces or smaller sheets of paper that you're inserting into your journal. And if you know specifically where you want them to go in your journal and you want them all lined up the same, just make a little mark on your template where you want it to go, so you know how to line it up. Same with if you were to do, if your cover and then your inside pages weren't exactly the same, you might want to just line up like your inside pages and make a mark right here and just say inside pages, because a lot of times your cover will be a different size than your inside pages. So that's what I do. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you guys. So I am going to finish putting holes in the rest of my signature, and then I will come back and show you guys how to sew the signature together. Okay guys, I am on my last page that I need to punch holes into it, so I thought I would show you one more time. If you guys understand it, just go ahead and fast forward to where I start sewing in the signature. But again, what I do is I line up my template and I draw where I want my holes to go. Or again, if you trust yourself that this is completely lined up, you can go ahead and punch through there. But again, I don't trust myself that everything's lined up, and it's so important to have your holes in the right spots so that all your pages are the same when you go ahead and start sewing your signatures together. That I find that even though this is kind of tedious and it would go faster if I did the binder clips and clipped all my pages together, I found that sometimes a page will slip and then my holes are in the wrong spots, and then I'm punching holes in spots that I don't want. So that's why I do like this technique And so again, I'll just zoom in closer so you guys can see me punch the hole in case you guys are curious how the tool works a little bit better. So again, here's what my tool looks like. And so I'm going to line it up where I drew my little line, and I'm making a hole right on the fold line right there. And again, I just apply just a slight amount of pressure, and it punches the hole for me. So there's that hole, and I'll do it again on the next one. So again, there's a little mark that I made. I'm going to push down. So there's my next hole. So now I got 2 holes. Going to do that with the third one. And then again with the 4th hole. Again, you just want to be exact just to make sure that your holes are on the fold lines. Okay, so now that is done. I'm going to put my whole journal together. So here, again, normally I do all my sewing and making my pages before I actually write in it, but since this was kind of a December daily and I wanted the ability to move pages around as I was journaling, that's why I'm doing all of my sewing at the end. But usually I do this at the very beginning before I've even written in my journals. So this was kind of a little backwards. So the next step is to take your string, and you're going to need your needle. And so now for measuring, for making sure that your string is going to be the right length, what you want to do is you want to make it 3 times the size of your journal here. And you'll have more than enough to be able to sew. So I just line it up at the top and the bottom. So that's 1 length. I move it back up again. That's 2. And that's 3. And then I usually give myself just a tad bit, but you don't have to. But I just like to make sure. And then that's where you snip. So that's the size of your string that you will need to sew. And again, I like to use the wax thread. And so you're just going to thread your needle. And we're going to start to sew here. Okay, now we're going to start sewing our journal together. And you want to just make sure before you go ahead and start sewing that you have all your pages in correctly, that they all have holes in them. And if you're happy with how everything looks, the next step is to decide if you want your signature to be or your string to fold on the inside, or where you tie it together on the inside, or if you want it hanging out on the outside. So on this one, I have it on the inside right here. And some people tie bows in the middle. You can also hang beads, or you can like punch out hearts or butterflies and then glue them onto the strings. So you just need to decide if you want your strings on the inside or the outside. So I usually prefer to have mine on the inside. And so I am going to start from the inside. And so you just want to choose one of the holes in the middle if you like to have it tied in the middle. But if you prefer to have it tied at the bottom or the top, then you would just choose to start at a different spot. So I usually start at this spot right here, the second hole from the top. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. So I start right here. And so I'm going to put my needle with the thread on it. I'm going to start there, and again, I'm in the middle of my signature, and so then I'm going to go through each page. I'm going to try and zoom in here so maybe you guys can see it better. So I'm going through each page in that same spot, and I'm just picking up each page on my needle. And so now I'm down to a smaller sheet, so I just line it up where I want. So I'm putting it right there. And sometimes you kind of lose it, so this is one of the reasons why I like to use a little bit longer needles, so I can usually get through all of my pages the first time without having to pull my needle and thread all the way through yet. So now I'm going into the cover, and so you can see it here on the outside. So now I'm just going to pull my string through. And so I'm pulling it through. And so here in the middle, I'm almost all the way, have pulled almost the whole string through. What I like to do is, of course, you're going to need to leave yourself a tail so that you have something to tie it off at the end. And so I usually leave it just a slightly longer than the page size here. And I take washi tape. Which you don't have to, you can just hold on to it, but I like to just try and glue it or tape it down just so it holds, so I don't pull it through all the way. You don't have to do that, but I just find that it helps a little bit, and it's still possible if I pull too hard that I'm going to pull it all the way through. So then my next step is I'm going to go back up on this back side, and I'm going to go to the top hole right here. And I'm going to start weaving my way back through, or not weaving, but putting the needle through all my pages again. And so I'm just going to do one page at a time, and I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit more here so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing, hopefully. This is kind of one of those tough things that's tough to show on the camera. I know some people will use binder clips and clip all their pages together and they're able to go through. I just find that this way, if I do one page at a time, I'm hopefully not going to miss anything. So hopefully you guys can kind of see. I'm just putting my needle through each page. And so since this one, I don't have a top hole, I don't have to worry about it. So I just kind of skip that one for now. I go on to the next page. Right now it is still pretty loose. You don't need to worry about that. So now I'm gonna pull it through all these pages again. So I'm gonna zoom out here again. So you're going to pull it so there's still a little slack right there. So I'm going to pull it. And there'll still be some wiggle room once we're done with this to pull tighter. But I try to make it fairly tight. So that there's no slack on that end. So now we're going to take our needle and we're going to go back through that very first hole that we did again. So I'll try and zoom in. So again, I just came up through this hole and I'm going to go down this hole right here. And so here again, I just do one page at a time. And you can hopefully see that I'm just lining up my needle next to my thread for each page as I go through. You can see that it's kind of starting to line up a little bit, so this is getting to be not so hard. If you look really closely, there's my needle right there next to the thread. I'm just slowly lining it up. This is kind of, again, one of those things, you just got to be kind of slow about it. And so now I'm back to my cover, and I just push that through. So again, I'm back to my cover and I pushed my needle through. I'm going to pull it through again. If you have a hard time, you can take like a pliers to pull your needle if you have a hard time. Usually I just have to wiggle it a couple of times and it goes through pretty good. So I'm still pulling it through. And I'm just making sure I'm looking at the inside also to where my string is. So I'm pulling it so now it's pretty tight, or it's taut, but it's not too tight because you don't want to, if you pull too tight, you're going to end up ripping your holes. But you do want it firm and secure. And you can see here, it still looks good right there. You just kind of wiggle it a little bit just to make sure all your thread's through and it's pulled all the way through. Once you've done a couple, this step gets to be pretty easy. So now the next step, I'm on the outside, is I'm going to go back through. There's still 2 holes left. I'm going to go through the next hole from where I just came out, and I'm going to weave my way through. And you'll find that as you get to each hole, it's going to get easier to go through your signatures because your pages are starting to line up really nicely. I'm again going to zoom in so you guys can hopefully see at least the little tip of my needle as it goes through each page. So again, I'm starting on the outside with the cover. So there's my needle. So I'm going to start winding it through each page. So I'm going to flip this next page. And of course there's a little bit of eyelash trim there, so it's kind of getting in the way, but that's okay. Go through each page, just be kind of slow and meticulous about it. So now I'm going to pick up that file folder. Just going through each page very carefully, and hopefully I'm staying somewhat on camera here. Now should be to my last page here. No, not quite. So I'll zoom out. So now I'm going to pull again my string. And so I'm just kind of tightening, and you can see it got a little tighter up there. I'm going to flip it this way and just kind of peek it, see how it's doing. So now you can see it got a little loose up here. So I'm just going to kind of pull a little bit, and then you just kind of work your threads to try and get it so that everything's tight. You don't want it to be too loose, but again, you don't want to pull too hard because you will rip your holes. So I like how that's looking right there. So now I'm ready to go on to the next step. So again, I take my needle and thread, and so now I am going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to weave my way back to the cover again. Now my pages are lining up pretty good here, so I might just have to even just lift each page and my needle's going to go in, but I'm going to try and just show you guys in each page as I flip through that the needle's going into where it's supposed to be. Just because everything's lining up nice, my needle is going all the way through each page. You can still see the needle right there. This piece again, since it was a shorter one, I don't have to worry about picking that one up. Again, my needle is still lining up with each page. So now I'm back to the cover, and it went all the way through the cover nicely. So now I'm going to pull my needle, push it through, and pull it out. So again, I'm kind of looking at the middle as I'm pulling and looking at the outside. I'm going to have to do a little adjusting again just by pulling it. So far everything looks kind of tight. and not too loose. That's just the big thing. You don't want to make it loose because you want your journal to hold together. So now the next step, we're on the back side, and so now we're going to sew back up, and so we're going to go back in the same hole. And if things are lined up correctly, you should just be able to push your needle through the hole. If you feel any bit of resistance, then what I suggest you do is you just go look, open it up again, and just look at each page and just kind of do the same thing. Because we can still tighten all of our, if it loosens up as you're doing this, we can still tighten everything. This page is always tough to see. Because if you are doing this and you're pushing it through and you're feeling resistance, that means it's hitting something other than the hole. And so you just want to, like I said, go very carefully into each hole. I'm going to try and zoom in again for this last part. And so I'm just trying to line up my needle right next to where that thread was the first time that it was weaved through. So that, you know, there is my needle. And so I'm just weaving it back in through the hole. And so now I'm back to the middle of the signature again. So I'm just going to pull up. And so I'm just going to tighten it, and then I'm going to take a look again and see how it looks. And so if you need to, you can just kind of play with your string and just tighten it. So now here, this washi held pretty good for this other one, but I am going to take that off because I don't need it anymore because that was just holding this one in place. So now I don't need my needle on anymore, so I take my needle off just so I don't accidentally poke myself. So again, I just make sure everything feels tight, that nothing's too loose. I take looks again at the outside and the inside. And so what I'm going to do is then just tie it together. And I just tie a knot. And you want it fair, you again want it tight, because if you do it too loose, then everything's going to wiggle in your journal, because you want it to hold together. And if it doesn't tie right the first time, you can always tie it a second. You can always undo it and tie it, so it's not a big deal. And you can still take it apart if for some reason you were to put in a piece of paper upside down or something. So I tighten it, it's pretty tight. I take one last look at it to make sure that everything looks good. And this is kind of a thick December daily. I'd use kind of some thicker cardstock for my signature, so it's still pretty thick and fat, but I like it. So at this point I could tie a little bow, or I'm probably going to hang like some sort of like little Christmas tree, or maybe an ornament punch or die cut at the ends of my string. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut these so that they're about the same size. And so I do have a little bit left, so there was a little bit more wiggle room with that string. I just wanted to show you guys. And usually what I end up doing then with this piece is I'll just tie it to a tag so that I'm not wasting it. So that's my signature. And so at this point, you can go ahead, and if you don't like being able to see your stitches on the outside, what you can do is, like on this one, I could cover it with a little bit of lace. If I wanted to do that, I do that often on my covers. I'll cover it with lace, like this other one I showed you earlier. I just left the stitch on the outside. But again, you can cover it with lace or some cardstock. What I'm going to choose to do on this one is I'm just going to string my ribbon here that I use to tie it shut. I'm just going to string it through the back just so it stays in place and that I won't lose it. so I can tie my journal shut. So that is my completed journal and how I make my four hole pamphlet stitch using a screw punch. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them below in the comment section. And I know I'm going to get a couple people asking where I purchased my screw punch. And I originally purchased it like 20 years ago at a store that dealt with bookbinding and making books and journal making. So that's where I purchased it, but I have seen it available online like through Amazon or through like Dick Blick, which is an art supply store. So I think you can find it at a lot of different art supply stores. And like I said, I do know that some of you guys may have purchased the one at Tuesday Morning, the Martha Stewart one. And this is what that cover looks like. Martha Stewart. It is called Screw Punch. And so that works too. I find that I've tried this one a few times, but I still prefer this one. I just like the size of the handle of this one better, and I find that this goes through paper easier than the Martha Stewart one does, but this one still gets the job done. So if this is the one that you have available, this definitely works. And this one's kind of cool just in that it holds the extra tips on the top. So that's kind of a nice feature with that Martha Stewart one. But this is still my go-to one. I just purchased this one just because I got it cheap at Tuesday Morning and thought it'd be nice to kind of have a backup and kind of compare them. But I still prefer this one. And it's definitely one of those tools that if for some reason this were to break, I would definitely go out and purchase another one. It's one of my go-to supplies. I use it in card making, besides journal making for putting in my eyelets. And you can buy replacement tips. They are made of steel, and so they never dull, but they will break if you're not using your self-healing mat right here. Some sort of mat like this. This one is also self-healing, this green one in the background, but I usually use this one for working on. So you just want to make sure that you are careful as what surface is behind your screw punch when you're using it. But that's, I guess, everything. And thanks so much for watching. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.